before. Not working? Okay, great. We should be live now.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the February 14th Public Design Commission public meeting. Happy Valentine's Day. And if you're watching on YouTube right now, the instructions for joining the meeting to give testimony can be found in the description below the video. You'll find a link to the sign-in form. Please do sign in if you'd like to give testimony so that we know to call on your name. And when you join the meeting, be sure to name yourself to coincide with the name that you signed up as, so we know who you are. Okay, Signe, I think we're ready to start.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Signe Nielsen. I'm president of the Public Design Commission. The meeting will begin with a roll call to confirm commissioner attendance. When I call your name, if you could please say here. Phil Ahrens.
Here.
Ken Seth Armstead.
Here.
Lori Hawkinson.
Here.
Deborah Martin.
Here.
Karen Keel.
Here.
Manuel Miranda.
Here.
Susan Morgenthau.
Here.
Ethel Sheffer. I know she's there. Meryl Tisch.
Here.
Mary Valverde.
Here.
Great, and myself. We have a full house, thank you. So we're now going to start out with voting on the consent agenda. Today we have items number 27990 and 28004 to 28033. Staff has noted Commissioner Miranda's and my own recusal on item 27990. Are there any other recusals to note? Okay, there are no further recusals. Thank you. So I will now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, if you could please state your vote for the consent agenda, approve all, or any exceptions you care to take on specific items. Phil Ahrens.
Approve.
Ken Seth.
Approve all.
Lori.
Approve all.
Deborah.
Approve all.
Karen.
Approve all.
Manuel.
Approve all.
Susan.
Approve all.
Ethel.
Approval.
Meryl.
Approve all.
Mary.
Approve all.
And myself, approve all. So that is unanimous support for the consent agenda, and everything is being passed. So we are now going to move on to the public hearing. Carrie, you're going to start with an announcement?
Yeah, so again, if anyone is watching on YouTube right now and you would like to give testimony on any of the projects, please join when the project is announced, and be sure to sign in using the form. That's there's a link to that form in the description below the video. You can also find the agenda there and the presentations for your perusal. And I think we're ready to begin.
Okay,
Grace?
so I'll just,
sorry.
I think maybe, whatever. So the first item that we're dealing with is 28034, the long-term loan for the Women's House by Faith Ringgold, from the Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island to the Brooklyn Museum. This project was presented at the January 18th meeting, and it was presented by Carrie Butler, and she will provide a summary and update, and then we will hear public testimony, followed by our deliberation and vote. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Signe. Grace, can you give me control of that? I can just go through it really quick as a reminder.
Try your arrow keys. There we go.
Got it. Oh, fast forward. Okay, as a reminder, this project was presented at the January public meeting, and commissioners This is the proposal from the Department of Correction to loan a painting by Faith Ringgold to the Brooklyn Museum. As a reminder, this is currently at the Rose M. Singer Center in Rikers Island. And members noted the future demolition of Rikers, which is part of the Borough-Based Jails Initiative, and the current reduced residents at the Rose M. Singer Center. So I'm not going to go through this in detail because we presented it before. I do want to note that the loan, just an update for commissioners, the loan is a 10-year loan. So at the end of the 10-year, the loan could be renewed, or Department of Correction can come back with a new proposal for a new relocation of the painting. And also as a reminder, this proposal came about as a specific request from the artist, and it would be first installed at the new museum for an exhibition on the artist's work, and then taken to the Brooklyn Museum, where it will be put on public display beginning in July. And as a reminder, the admissions to the Brooklyn Museum are suggested admissions. So if you do not wish to pay, you do not have to. The Brooklyn Museum is a member of the Cultural Institutions Group, meaning it's on city-owned property. These institutions are stewards to city-owned property, and they provide cultural services accessible to all New Yorkers. Okay, so we have one person signed up to give testimony. That would be Todd Fine. Can someone unmute? Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi. My name is Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group, which advocates for public art in New York City. I'd first like to make an administrative objection that the DOC should be here. This is a formal item. It should be presented again, and community meetings should not preempt the presentation of agencies to the public. That's critical to have a responsive public design commission that is responsible to the public. There's no reason why this committee meeting needed to preempt this public hearing today. So this is a bad precedent for the Public Design Commission. It should be heard again with DOC present so they can respond to people like myself's comments. Now, in the last few months, we've seen several examples of public artwork being given to private entities. And under the massive inequality that we see in New York City, this is a very bad precedent that is going to continue as the private sector consumes public sector, especially valuable objects. And it's related to phenomena that we see in outsourcing, bids, and private parks. And we need to have explicit principles on this. This cannot just be a discretion of the design commission that they just say, oh, sure, a powerful political entity wants to give a public ownership to a private entity. We'll approve that because it makes sense, or the artist approves, or we have some various justifications. There needs to be a reason here, because otherwise the precedent is that massive public things of value can be presented. And as a result, those things are actually in the Constitution of New York. There's actually some rules about this which haven't even been discussed. This type of thing, in this specific case, it was specifically politicized. This was perhaps the final act of the de Blasio administration. So it was like the final day. So there's obviously some political maneuvering that we don't know between the First Lady, Chirlane McCray, the Brooklyn Museum, which also, by the way, got $50 million from the city in the final days of the administration. There's obviously some problems here, and this issue needs to be tabled until procedures can be set, and until the terms of the specific terms here can be made clear to public hearing. It's not enough for you just to kind of scroll through PowerPoint. You need to say, okay, here's the number of years, here's the conditions, what would we do under these different scenarios? I think this needs to be clear for the public. Now, there's dangers here. Specifically, it changes the purpose of the artwork. Here was intended specifically for people in jail. That was the purpose of it. And now it's going to be given to a private museum for the consumption of elite art-goer attendance. Why couldn't it have been gone to another jail? Why, this was the question that hasn't been discussed. Also, it enables corruption. Powerful political entities under lobbyists can now take artworks that were given to the public, in this case, paid for by the public, and given for ticket sales or private benefit. It also benefits the wealthy who have the power and the wealth, like the Brooklyn Museum's board, to get objects like this. There's a bad precedent here. In the previous hearing, people talked about the lack of maintenance that DOC was doing. That's not a justification. The PDC needs to stand up and say, no, agencies need to do maintenance. They need to maintain their artworks, and we're not going to allow you to give them away
Thank
to
you,
private
Todd.
entities as a justification. Finally, I'll end with the artist. The point that the artist can authorize, that is not valid. The artist has many different factors that are going into it, and that needs to be interrogated.
I'm sorry.
Do we have anyone else to testify?
Yeah, I believe the artist is here and would like to say something.
Good.
Do we unmute Grace Matthews? Is that the person?
Yes. And I do want to say that the Department of Correction is here. If commissioners have any questions, the Department of Correction and the museum are both in the meeting.
Jenna or Rebecca, can we unmute Grace Matthews?
Yeah,
Yes, I sent a request already.
There you are.
Can they see us?
We can see you. Go ahead, please.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to say something, Faith?
I didn't know I was on.
I know, we're just now we're on.
We're just being a witness, but we approve it.
Okay, thank you.
We approve.
Okay. So I do want to just reiterate that the full presentation was given at a public meeting. It was also included in the agenda for anyone to witness. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a 10-year loan. There's an option for, if all parties agree, to extend the loan. The Department of Correction can also return to the Public Design Commission with a proposal if they so think it's appropriate for the relocation of the painting into another facility. This is not, we are not giving an artwork away. This is a loan, and the Brooklyn Museum is a city institution. It's operating on city-owned land, and it's also will be put on public display, and you can go look at it free. I do want to say that, in terms of access, the existing facility that the Department of Correction had noted, and commissioners, if you'd like to ask them, again, they're on the meeting. Chelsea is here from Department of Correction and can answer any questions you have in terms of the existing facility, the schedule for the demolition of Rikers, and the existing residents at the Roseanne Singer Center. And also the Brooklyn Museum is here, and they can answer any questions you may have.
Yes, I'll just say that with all due respect, Mr. Fine, most of your facts are incorrect in this particular regard. I do feel that this is a very different condition than some of the others that we've been faced, because this is merely a loan. It is a loan from a building that is going to be demolished. It is presently hardly publicly accessible. And so I am in full support of this relocation. And of course, it is encouraging that the artist concurs as well. Do any commissioners have questions or would like to say anything before we take a vote?
I would like to say, as a commissioner of public design, I take it very seriously that an artwork by someone as notable as Faith Ringgold will be allowed to be seen by people in a community which is mostly people of color in Brooklyn. I happen to live near the Brooklyn Museum, and this is Crown Heights, and there's a large community of color who haven't had access to this particular work. So I think it's really going to be a benefit that people know that that work is there and that they can go visit it for free if they want. And I also think that as a neighbor of the Brooklyn Museum, I'm glad that the Brooklyn Museum will be a long-term home for this work. And that, you know, I personally have grown up as a younger artist being able to access Faith Ringgold's work, but I was in art school. But for people who don't go to art school, this will be a new opportunity to see a new work. So I actually think that most of what Mr. Fine was saying as a criticism is actually a truth, that he wants the work to be in the public domain, and it will be in this loan. So I thank you for your comment, and I want to support everything that you say in terms of making this work more accessible for more people, and especially people of color who don't have access to many of the artworks that many artists of color are making. So thank you for your comments.
Any other commissioners care to speak up? Yeah, if not, I think that we are very pleased. We thank the Department of Corrections and the Brooklyn Museum for collaborating on this move. And I will now take a roll call vote on item 28034. When I call your name, please state your vote for the project along with any final comments you may have. Phil Ahrens.
Approve.
Ken Seth Armstead.
Strongly approve.
Lori Hawkinson.
I second that, strongly approve.
Deborah Martin.
Approve.
Manuel Miranda.
Approve.
Karen Keel.
I think I'm recused from this as the representative of the Brooklyn.
Indeed, my apologies. Susan Morgenthau.
Approve.
Ethel Sheffer.
Approve.
Merrill Tisch.
Approve.
Mary Valverde.
Approve, and like I say, I'm a big fan, so thank you.
And myself approve. So it is unanimously approved with one recusal. And I am now personally recused from the next project. So I will leave the meeting and we'll turn it over to Vice President Phil Ahrens, who will chair the meeting in my absence. Thank you, and I'll be back.
Good morning, everyone. The next public hearing item is item 28035, the construction of Plaza 33, including installation of a distinctive sidewalk, West 33rd Street at 7th Avenue, Manhattan. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, followed by commissioner deliberation and a vote.
Giving control to Melissa from MNLA, and then please unmute Emily Weidenhoff.
Beautiful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Weidenhoff, and I'm the Director of Public Space at New York City Department of Transportation. And I'm here with a really large, fantastic team from Vornado and Matthews Nielsen. We're excited to present this design to you today. It is representative of a lot of ongoing collaboration and coordination with Vornado in the larger Penn district area. DOT has worked for many years. We can go to the next slide on further pedestrianizing and prioritizing cyclists in this district, particularly along Broadway through Herald Square and connections to Penn Station along 32nd Street. And Plaza 33 has been in a temporary condition for many years and proved very successful. And so we're excited to get to this moment about thinking about it as a permanent public space. If we go to the next slide, that really reinforces the huge flow of kind of regional transportation into this area. And so as we move forward and look at the design, I think largely the real purpose of this space is adding pedestrian space, allowing for the huge volumes of people to flow through the district and have a safe and vibrant public space while they do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judy Kessler from Vornado.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to present Plaza 33 to you today. It's a project we started working on 7 years ago as a pilot with DOT and the community board and many participants. We appreciate, as you could see from this slide, that Plaza 33 sits in a central spot for almost 1 million people coming through the Penn District daily. And we recognize our collective responsibility to dignify and humanize that experience. We go to the next page. So zooming in, you can see that Plaza 33 sits at the heart of this, what we call a triple super block, which will have unified distinctive paving expanding out from Plaza 33. It's consistent with your approval of the 1 Penn distinctive sidewalk last month. Thank you for that. And you can see it here at 1 Penn, 2 Penn and Plaza 33. The ongoing redevelopments of 1 Penn Plaza and 2 Penn Plaza complements and expands upon these public realm improvements. 1 Penn will have over 1 acre of POPs, privately owned public plazas, approved through the city's ULURP process. And 2 Penn Plaza, if you go to the next slide, will have a welcoming new 7th Avenue Plaza covered by a heroic scaled canopy or bustle along its 460-foot length along 7th Avenue. And then the new East End Gateway, which is some people are calling the rabbit ear, sits within Plaza 33 and provides Penn Station access to one of the station's busiest points. Page 9. And then the longer term development plans for the area, as Emily mentioned, are being worked on by Governor Hochul's team and DOT. And they provide for more pedestrian spaces through sidewalk widenings, together with bike lanes and significant lengths of shared streets. And then at the next page, Plaza 33 is at the approximate midpoint of the current plans for a shared street running from 6th to 9th Avenue. The scale of Plaza 33 is about 20% larger than the recently opened 1 Vanderbilt Plaza at Grand Central. And it will serve a similar purpose, whether it contains just 1 train station entrance as it does now, or if it's bookended by a second entrance in the mid-block, as is the plans of the state right now. This aerial photo looking west along 33rd Street, west being the top of the page, is where you can see the current construction for the Long Island Railroad concourse beneath 33rd Street and the ongoing work at 1 Penn and 2 Penn Plaza. We're seeking preliminary approval of Plaza 33 now to enable the plaza construction to proceed early next year upon completion of the concourse beneath. And now we turn it to our landscape architect, Melissa Howe, to explain the project design.
Thank you so much, Judy. And now I'll be taking us through a few site photos, along with design considerations, plaza design, and lastly, the different plaza elements. For site context, the photo on the left is looking towards Plaza 33 from the east side of 7th Avenue. And the photo on the right, we're standing in Plaza 33, looking east towards the Empire State Building. These 2 photos show the current space and the ongoing construction along 33rd Street with MSG and Moynihan in the background. And just to give you a better sense of the space, these 2 photos were taken in 2018 before construction began, showing the pilot program. The intent of the plaza design is really to provide a place of respite and lushness for the district that belies the complexities of circulation, transit, and utility needs within this area. This plan shows the proposed design and the extent of the plaza. Plaza 33 lies between 7th Avenue and the MSG loading dock area, with Pearson Park and Penn 1 to the north and Penn 2 to the south. This plan also shows the new subway entrance by 7th Avenue that East End Gateway, or Rabbit's Ear, as Judy mentioned, which takes up a big chunk of the plaza. As Judy and Emily mentioned, the plaza will continue the design language that we've worked with you to establish for the sidewalks in this district. You can see that in this diagram, which shows the at-grade DOT-owned plaza areas and sidewalks in orange and the adjacent POPs plazas in pink. So in terms of design consideration, Plaza 33 is really this critical juncture where all these different spaces and jurisdictions overlap. This also includes, of course, what's happening beneath the plaza, where work is being done on the roof of Penn Station to double the width and the height of the Long Island Railroad concourse. That raising of the roof and the resulting shallowness between that roof and the plaza surface above it are among the considerations that we looked at. There's also utilities to the north and 2 Con Ed manholes, the western of which we are working with Con Ed to try to relocate at the moment. So what this means is that the design of the plaza features has to be pretty compact, especially because of the high traffic going into and out of the new transit entrances. This diagram shows the different spatial zones within the plaza. We have the clear circulation zone to the east, the more intimately scaled public seating to the west, and a central circulation and programming node at the connection to Pearson Park. This is an aerial view that's looking southwest with 2 Penn and the East End Gateway in the foreground, where you can see the distinctive paving flowing into the plaza and really the need to keep this area clear. Plaza 33 is in the background, softening the transition to that MSG area. It's a spot of greenery that really draws you in with tall trees and plantings as you're approaching from the east or the west. And in terms of plaza design, it must feel lively and welcoming here, but also allow for the competing needs for pedestrian circulation and spaces for pause. So movable tables and chairs are scattered beneath the trees, planters, which are pulled south, which creates this slow zone for people to rest and meander through, while the northern edge of the plaza remains open and clear as a fast lane so that people can move quickly across 33rd Street. The trees are really the defining element of the plaza, and they create a sense of place. Earlier on in the design process, we explored having the trees coming directly out of the paving. But as we saw earlier, there just isn't enough soil depth for the trees to be big and healthy. So we have to raise the trees up in planters, and we explored many iterations and forms for these, all with varying degrees of success. The most successful of these is the design you see here, which features round planters with asymmetrical seating. It's important that the space feel dynamic and not completely rigid and formal. So the offset benches add a subtle playfulness to the space, while also allowing for different types of seating to be pulled closer under the trees. In this view, we're standing further west along 33rd Street by MSG, looking back towards 7th Avenue. You can see the plaza trees in the distance, tying together the different elements of green along this corridor. The nice thing about the round planters is that the plaza really has no front or back, and it's equally welcoming from all sides. Up next is a series of plan diagrams that show how the different elements of the plaza work together. Here you can see the proposed design with the expanded pedestrian ramp and curb cuts on both sides of the plaza that facilitate access into the space. This diagram shows the major east-west pedestrian circulation axis along that northern fast lane and the north-south axes along 7th Avenue and the connection to Pearson Park. Emergency vehicular access is also routed along that northern fast lane. And the intent is really that this plaza will serve over 10,000 people each day. So the majority of the plaza needs to remain open and clear. Zooming in on that respite zone, we see that the organization of the planters allows for pockets of movable seating to be interspersed beneath the trees. This offers a nice contrast to the other movable seating plazas found elsewhere in Midtown. The 34th Street Partnership will be the maintenance partner for Plaza 33, and they'll be organizing the movables each day to keep those circulation zones clear. Diving into the various plaza elements, this section depicts the raised planters sitting on top of the Penn Station roof. The planters will be clad in a lighter stone to contrast with the paving. They will have an illuminated reveal at the base and a sloped metal edge that provides additional soil depth and acts as a back for the bench areas. For the trees, we've selected the October Glory Red Maple, which is a beautiful and large tree that's used throughout the city. It has red buds in the spring and glorious red leaves in the fall. The understory planting will also continue this theme of seasonality with colorful and lush flowering plants that will bloom throughout the year. The distinctive district-wide paving will also be carried into the plaza with the same petite granite stone and the same field paving pattern. However, beneath the planters, we've designed a radiating accent pattern out of square cobbles, which we're calling the cloud paving. It's the same stone, just with a different pattern that extends the geometry of the planters and really reinforces the idea that this is a special place. The movable furnishings will be simple and in keeping with those used elsewhere in the district, such as the pops at Penn 1. And as part of the Penn Station work, security bollards will be installed around Plaza 33. These are a requirement from the NYPD and MTA in order to protect these busy transit entrances. The bollards will be similar to those that are already installed at Moynihan, but with a little bit more of a dome top to prevent coffee cups and litter from gathering on top. In terms of lighting, we really want the plaza to feel inviting and safe at all times. So in addition to meeting illumination requirements, we are also providing tree up lights and underbench lighting. This plan shows the lighting design with the underbench and tree up lights, as well as the existing streetlight locations on either side of the plaza. We want the plaza to be as free of obstructions as possible, so we are also exploring a moonlighting strategy on top of the buildings to illuminate the plaza. This has been done very successfully at places like Rockefeller Center and Bryant Park as examples. Lastly, these are the proposed lighting fixtures for the plaza. The moonlighting, the engraved tree up lights, and of course, the existing 34th Street partnership poles. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing any comments or questions that you may have.
Signe, we do not have anyone signed up to give testimony on this project.
Phil is running the meeting.
Oh, sorry, Phil.
Looks like
Phil is muted.
So
Todd, hold on.
I'm good.
Todd
No
wants
public
to-
testimony?
Hold on. Go ahead, Todd.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I did
Okay.
sign up.
You're not on our list somehow. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I signed up, yes. So in this blurry of adjectives in this, we are facing sort of an Orwellian presentation here because this deal is not set. This is dependent on a mass development of a new Hudson Yards type campus around Penn Station. But there's massive public resistance to this at public hearings of hundreds of people going late until 2 in the morning to testify against this. And this whole scheme is dependent on the mass privatization of public space and the use of eminent domain actions to allow a campus of about 5 or 8 to 9 skyscrapers by one single company around a public transportation hub that would essentially create their campus. And what we see in this presentation today is that it's really an attempt to create a sort of pathway for a luxury mall that would be the retail spaces around these new mega skyscrapers controlled by one company. I found the sign couture to be very, which you saw over and over again in the presentation, indicative of the real purpose here, which is to create a pathway of empty space, of dead space, to drive people into the retail of these luxury stores that are really geared toward the office workers in this huge mega campus controlled by one company in an Orwellian way. Now you notice that this is the only public space, just a small sliver in what is going to be a series of pops that they said that are all over the place. Yet Vornado was able to both determine all their pops and clearly have influence over this one public space, which, despite all the adjectives of dignified, humanized, lush, respite, rest, is a dead space. It's an empty space that has a monoculture. There's no greenery. There's just these 5 plantings of a couple of trees in a massive area. It doesn't look like New York. It's not a comfortable place to sit. It's controlled by private entities and bids. It's a dead space, and it's indicative of the moribund public design that we get under this type of Hudson Yards monopoly capitalism. It's disgusting. And the Public Design Commission needs to fight back and say, within this mega complex, there has to be one space at least that is truly a public space where people can do other things besides just be funneled into luxury retail. This should be tabled until there's a clear consensus on both the funding and the public support for this entire project. And it shouldn't be done piecemeal, which is an attempt to subvert the democratic opposition here. So this is not set. As they said, it's not beginning for a year. The Design Commission should hold back until we can truly humanize the space, responding to the mass sentiment of public comment in general. And Vornado is not the driver here and should not be. Thank you.
I do want to just clarify the Public Design Commission's jurisdiction here. We do not have jurisdiction over the general project plan, the governor's larger plan for the Penn District. So our jurisdiction is limited to the public right-of-way, so sidewalks, and in this case, a street that has been a temporary plaza and is going to be turned into a permanent one. And if commissioners do have questions, we can go back to the plans and drawings and look at the circulation requirements. There are circulation requirements and underground utilities that the applicant can speak to. There's one person with their hand raised. Okay.
Hey guys, sorry, I just had a booster. I'm not feeling that great, but let me tell you what the problem with this plaza is. We're going to have so many transients in this area. And already, let me tell you guys a little situation that I have. I'm walking down, right down the street, and I see a bunch of guys. I think they're doing the vaccine. I haven't had my booster yet. I go and I start talking to them. They're pretty nice to me. I ended up doing the vaccine. After my 15-minute wait period, I felt like I've never felt before. I start hanging out with these guys. I end up doing about 6 vaccines. I've never done anything in my life. Come to find out, a week later, I'm not feeling well. I'm diagnosed with HIV. So let me.
All right. Thank you very much, Alex. And I'm so sorry to hear about your wife. Okay, we can move forward.
Commissioners, are there any?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Ethel, yeah.
Yeah, I understood, I think, what Carrie has described as the jurisdiction of the PDC. But the one thing that in the last weeks, is that it's my understanding that while the governor has approved the overall plans surrounding and the station, that city planning, New York City planning has raised questions, a number of them, about aspects of the plan. And so I'm simply asking, since this is all in process now, is it appropriate, can we still vote the PDC on what has been presented, that plaza, or and will that occur irrespective of what might be the changes as city planning has offered changes in the overall plan? If it can stand on its own, and we have that jurisdiction, of course, but I'm a little bit confused about what has recently occurred.
DOT, Emily, can you speak to that, or someone from the team?
Or Vornado, Judy has her hand up also.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Judy, why don't you start and I can jump in.
Yeah, so I apologize for not saying this up front. Plaza 33, I want to say, almost has nothing to do with the general project plan. It was conceived 7 years ago, before there was a general project plan, and worked on, in several different pilot forms, and its funding is totally private, and no money is being taken from the city, no money is being taken by the state in order to put this plaza in place as soon as possible so that the public can benefit from improvements and not wait until there's a general project plan. The reason for showing the general project plan is to say DOT has already considered what might happen in the future if the general project plan goes ahead, and that this plaza still works with or without a general project plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Are there any other comments from commissioners? If not, are we ready to take a vote? Understanding we're voting only on this limited plaza. That is not a vote in favor of the larger Penn Station project. Kenseth?
Approve.
Lori?
Approved.
Deborah?
Approve.
Manuel?
Approve.
Susan?
Approve.
Ethel?
Approve.
Mary?
Approve.
Meryl?
Approve.
And did I leave someone out?
Karen,
Oh, Karen?
approve.
And I approve as well. So that concludes conversation and the vote on this particular item. I will now return the meeting back to our president, Signe. Thank you.
Signe, okay. Did Signe make it back in? Ah, there she is. Okay. Great.
Thank you. You're gonna-
Okay, I'll just make another announcement about the public. Anyone watching on YouTube, if you'd like to give testimony on the Central Park project, the reconstruction of the Kinderberg, or the following project, please do sign up on, there's a link to the testimony form it's in the description of the video, below the video. And there are also instructions on how to join our YouTube, our Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Signe, it's Meryl. Around now, if we were meeting together, you'd be offering us popcorn. Why is it our fault that we're not meeting? Where's the popcorn?
I know, and I'd be eating it like mad.
Sorry.
Next month. Okay, so the next public hearing is for item number 28036, reconstruction of the Kinderberg, restoration of the Chess and Checkers House and adjacent site work, East 65th Street, Transverse Road between Center Drive and East Drive, Central Park, Manhattan. Per standard procedure, we will hear from the applicants, then we'll hear any public testimony, followed by our deliberation and vote. So please begin.
I've given control to Christopher Nolan, if we could unmute him.
Good afternoon, commissioners, or good morning, commissioners. I'm Christopher Nolan. I'm the Chief Landscape Architect with the Central Park Conservancy, and we're here to present a series of improvements at the Kinderberg and Chess and Checkers House that really relate to three primary things. One is some improvements that have been reviewed by the Landmarks Commission related to creating a public comfort station in Chess and Checkers House, the construction of the largest rustic structure historically, the largest rustic structure in the park, the Kinderberg, and then some accessibility improvements related to gaining access to this area. The site is, as Signe had introduced, just south of the 65th Street Transverse Road in the southeast corner of the park. It actually builds on some work that we have presented publicly and received approval on, which creates greater public access and accessibility improvements from the Grand Army Plaza up the closed East Drive to the dairy. This is the site here. This is the Chess and Checkers house and the pergola. And our intent is to build on the accessibility improvements here to create public access here, rebuild the rustic pergola, and do some work on the comfort station. We have just recently completed at the end of the calendar year a comprehensive core and shell restoration and interior renovation of the dairy. Part of that work is site development that related to accessibility improvements. We created an accessible ramp down to it. And this project will actually do site improvements up at the Kinderberg, which is a beautiful rocky high point, and create accessible access between the dairy and the Kinderberg and the Chess and Checkers house, which will be outfitted with a public restroom. I should note that the dairy as a public amenity does not have public restrooms in it. It's a very small structure. And historically, there is a relationship between these two buildings as part of the children's district. The site itself, this is the view from the edge of the loggia, the recently restored loggia at the dairy. Looking up, as you can see, it is actually built at a high point on top of the rock. The area we are proposing the ramp is between the cone here and the existing set of steps, which is the main point of access up to the Kinderberg itself and the Chess and Checkers house. There is some constraints of where we can fit the ramp in because of this tree. And this particular location, not only is it closest to the Kinderberg, the relationship between the Kinderberg and the dairy, it also gives us the kind of greatest soil depth on top of this rock outcrop to create planting margins between the lengths of the ramp itself. And just moving around the site, you can see the rock outcrop really is the dominant element on the where the Kinderberg was built. And there's some significant grade change. Our grade change at the set of steps is about 14 feet, actually 13 feet as you're looking back. Playmates Arch, you would have to go down and up and around to get to the other side. There is a shorter access around adjacent to the drive. But on the other side, as you can see, very, very shallow soil depths, and there's just about 9.5 feet of grade change there. And it would be a much greater length around from the access from the dairy itself. A little bit of site history. I'll move through this very quickly. The Kinderberg is part of a series of elements that were built in the 19th century in an area called the Children's District. It was actually built specifically to kind of relate to children and their caregivers. The Kinderberg was a rustic structure, which is a respite from the kind of activity of the park. The dairy was built as a site to distribute milk from upstate New York to children who use the park. There was actually the park's first playground. There was a set of swings there at the base, you can see. And there was a small facility. It was basically an outhouse called the Children's Cottage, which provided restrooms to the area. This area now has no public restrooms except down by the Heckscher Playground, which is quite a ways away, not accessible. And the dairy as a public structure does not have public restrooms. Singularly, the biggest question our staff get answered in both facilities is where is the public restroom? The rustic structure itself, you get a sense of the steps that lead up to her. There's about a 13-foot grade change between the adjacent path and the Kinderberg itself. This was the largest rustic structure built in the park. It was lost sometime in the 1940s. Really, really a beautiful and elaborate rustic structure. Then on the interior was a series of benches and tables, and was this kind of spot in the park people can kind of pull out of the activity of the park and rest with their small children. The site as it was in the 1930s aerial, you can see that the rustic structure over here still existed. By this point, this is the dairy. The children's cottage had been lost. There was no public restrooms. And you can see this is an area of the 59th Street Pond, which is where a woman rink was actually built. By the 1950s, it was just an open plaza. The Parks Department in-house design effort actually constructed the Chess and Checkers house. It was an open air pavilion without heat that opened up to the outside, and there was a series of Chess and Checkers tables. And you get a sense of that rocky outcrop. The footprint of the actual Kinderberg has remained the same. The small retaining wall still exists. The bluestone coping is all original material. And it was a big open site with classic parks benches and Chess and Checkers tables. Trees were added some point pre-1980. And then in 1984, the Conservancy actually, we did some renovations to the interior of the structure itself to outfit it as a more effective visitor center and some to facilitate the programming. And we built a dimensional lumber pergola to create some foreground and make reference to what was there historically. The structure itself, it's a brick structure. We'll renovate it, renovate the interior, do a cleaning and repointing, replacement of the roof. All of this work is generally in kind. The interior structures, the interior work, the outside. We do some programming. We give out chess and checkers pieces to play on the tables that are out there. And there's also some tournaments that we actually manage through the course of the warm summer months. The plaza itself is in need of replacement. The pavers, the hex pavers, which were put in sometime in the early 1980s, have heaved. The pavement underneath the benches is cracked. You can see there's a crack on the actual concrete table. And the pergola itself is well past its useful life. From a dimensional lumber perspective, it needs to be replaced. Our proposed improvements, just briefly, just for context, the interior of the structure, about 2/3 of it will be outfitted as a public restroom. It'll actually facilitate greater programming because we can actually now run programs without sending people out to other areas to have bathrooms. It'll actually provide public restrooms related to the visitor center at the dairy. And we still maintain some space on the interior to run our programming. We launch tours from here, and we will continue to give out the chess and checkers pieces and board games. It is within our proposal to actually recreate from historic drawings and photographs the rustic structure around the existing building itself. The trees will remain. A plan view of what's there. Again, we maintain the existing trees, slightly larger tree pits. The rustic structure, we will create benches and tables underneath. It'll function exactly the same way. Building out based on basically a historic layout of posts to the greatest extent possible, given the fact that the structure itself is slightly larger than the interior, some realignment of the post as it relates to the adjacency to the building itself. Building, as you can see, historically, there were rustic benches with tables, both rectangular tables and circular tables around it. Our proposal actually tries to align to the greatest extent possible the post spacing and the geometries of the historic structure. It'll cantilever out over the edge, and we will build into it. The next slide indicates chess and checkers tables to facilitate the type of program we do there now. Simple steel posts on the non-rustic benches with a wood seat, ebony wood tabletops with an inlay for the chess and checkers tables. And we will build the rustic structure, working from photographs and historic drawings to match the detail as we have done in historic, rustic structures throughout the park, and some details on the benches. The benches will actually, we will provide ADA access and one table without a seat to allow for a mobility device to get in there and play. And just some precedent shots of our work done throughout the park on our rustic structure. We actually have an in-house crew, which actually does all the decorative work and the construction of the benches. Pretty important in terms of capturing that historic kind of craft, but also in terms of maintaining this in the long term. We have both. And then lastly, the accessibility improvements in terms of making this both the amenity of the rustic structure, the public restrooms, and access to the program accessible. As I had mentioned, it is our intent to do it on the facet which is closest to the dairy, creating the connection to the public restrooms up here. There is a constraint to this tree where the cursor is, basically about just over 13 feet of grade change adjacent to the steps. We are able to open up the ramps, the runs of the ramps, to allow planting in between them. Some cross sections will show that. It's a simple exercise of math. The 13 feet, that's the length of the ramp. We are able to fit it in, keep it away from the intersection, and allow for as robust a planting margin as possible. And we have soil depth there to actually accommodate the planting. You get a sense of what that is in cross section. There are some sections where the drops are greater on the retaining walls than code requires us to put guards. There'll be very simple steel handrails Where necessary, we'll use a wire mesh infill as we do on some of our perimeter fencing around the park to be as transparent as possible. And then some illustrative ramp. As it lays in, you get a sense of the rustic structure. There'll be an in-kind restoration of the steps. You'll see that we've added handrails to meet code. It is primary access up to a public amenity requires handrails. The width of it requires 3 sets of handrails. Where the drop is greater than 30 inches, we will actually do that infill and cantilever the handrail with a transparent wire mesh, which is the same as you move your way up the ramp itself. And then a perspective looking this way, be a small ornamental tree we'll need to transplant. The retaining walls themselves will be concrete core with a bluestone veneer. The intent on that is to use a material which exists on the site, but in a contemporary way. That'll kind of blend the nature of the stone. I think also will kind of blend in with the materials used throughout the park and be referential to what's there. You get a sense of the planting, which will create a sense of scale on the ramp that's there. And then just lastly, just a precedent shot we've shown to all the communities. This is, we've made a number of accessibility improvements in this. We view the ramp as an architectural intervention. It's not a pedestrian path. So in terms of its geometries, and after the plantings go in, the sense of scale really allows it, despite its very architectural geometry, to kind of blend with the landscape. And that is everything. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Your usual thorough, excellent presentation. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Well, we do have testimony.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. George Calderaro is first. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. We regret that the Central Park Conservancy and the Parks Department do not more boldly seek to mitigate intrusive 20th century features like the Chess and Checkers house that conflict with Olmsted and Vaux's brilliant park design. At least the proposed alterations to the building won't make it worse. However, we urge the removal of the apparently unapproved HVAC units hanging on this facade, just visible in slide 6. The Victorian Society strongly supports the enlargement and redesign of the pergola. The new, more rustic appearance of the pergola and its furnishings will serve to better obscure the masonry pavilion and will be much closer in appearance to the original Kinderberg and in keeping with the character of most of the park's original rustic shelters and pergolas. We find, however, that the proposed access ramp is extremely inappropriate to the character of Central Park. This kind of gash through the landscape is antithetical to the naturalistic and picturesque character that is the entire basis for the entire design of Central Park. The precedent to which it is being compared at the Arsenal is not apropos, as that is a sloped walk, not a ramp with walls and railings. Also, the character of the section of the park near the Arsenal is entirely different, dominated by the formality of the relationship of the entrance to the Arsenal and the adjacent zoo. Here at the Kinderberg, we're in the heart of the park where every alteration should be premised on supporting the naturalistic and picturesque character of the original park plan, which, as Olmsted admonished, is a single work of art. The Kinderberg has no back or front, and it's possible that a less intrusive ramp or sloped walk can be installed on the opposite end to the west or northwest, a less sensitive area for alteration than the immediate dairy landscape. The integrity of the park's design is more important than a convenient restroom. But wherever a ramp may be located, the materials, design, and detailing of its facing, railings, and pavements should fit the historic character of the park, not conflict with it. Vaux and Mold knew how to design beautiful yet recessive park structures by using dark rock-faced stone and ornamental metal and wood features with detailing blends like with park foliage, long, flat, straight, bright, undifferentiated surfaces are anathema. The proposed cut bluestone coping on ramp walls of an unidentified material will not do. In its review, the Landmarks Commission recommended that the ramp's walls be rusticated or rock face stone and that the ramp be pulled away from the historic stair to the Kinderberg. These are both important modifications that would help reduce the intrusive nature of the ramp in the landscape and its deleterious effect on the historic stair. The proposal being reviewed by PDC does not incorporate these recommendations from the LPC. Finally, the proposed sea of railing seen in slide 38 must be reduced. The proliferation of railings and fences proposed here and increasingly seen throughout the park are anathema to the park's historic naturalistic design, no matter how hard the renderings try to disguise them with temporary plantings. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Christabel Goff.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Christabel Goff. I'm speaking for the Society for the Architecture of the City. We've been monitoring the Landmarks Preservation Commission for many years, and we do have a problem with this application similar to the Victorian Society. Everyone welcomes the proposed wisteria pergola at the Kinberg, but we think the LPC advisory report incorrectly represents the LPC decision on the design of the associated access ramp. A Giuliani administration charter change, section 854H, gives LPC binding jurisdiction over buildings in designated parks and advisory jurisdiction over structures that are landscape features. This requires the LPC to issue an advisory report on changes to landscape features. The agency does not have authority, as you know, to prevent what is regarded as a landscape change. In current LPC practice, this apparently leads the agency to issue reports that are described as positive, even when all the commissioners were very critical of aspects of the proposal, and their resulting resolution expressed that criticism quite clearly. We do not understand what would compel the commission to issue a so-called positive report for a project it does not fully support. A negative report would not be binding on the PDC, but surely that does not mean that a negative report is prohibited or even necessarily futile. The actual text of the resolution the commission adopted, read aloud at the 12/7/21 hearing, item 10, and recorded on YouTube, was significantly altered in the advisory report, weakening its impact. All 8 landmarks commissioners who heard the application criticized the design of the new access ramp, and the chair authored and supported a resolution which clearly stated that the ramp should be removed away from the stair and that the, quote, uniformly smooth surface of the retaining wall does not reflect the naturalistic character of the surrounding landscape. This was an expert opinion, not a mere humble suggestion, as the advisory report implies. Common sense suggests that the language of the resolution cannot reasonably be construed as an endorsement of the proposed design, even though the final authority to approve construction rests with the PDC. And I'd just like to add that the presentation clearly shows images of that uniformly smooth surface on a retaining wall. They are speaking of a bluestone veneer. I don't think that the document, if it is approved, upholds that contention. Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Theodore Greenwald.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners of the Public Design Commission. This is Theodore Greenwald. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Our current climate crisis requires that we challenge outdated 20th century notions of progress, such as raise and rebuild, and remove and replace. The removal of any green space and its replacement by hot pavement in Central Park or any park should be done as sparingly as possible and only when no alternative is possible. Fortunately, there is a better way. Study of the original plan shows Olmsted and Volk's original western entry to what was then called the Kinderberg, a children's attraction. One might think that this existing western entrance as the precursor of today's ADA, which then accommodated caregivers burdened with small children and wheeled perambulators. There is no compelling reason to mutilate the Kinderberg with obtrusive paved switchback ramps on its steepest eastern slope, while to its west there is a gentle grade, and the existing historic path could accommodate all visitors with a minimal new ADA-compliant regrading and far less intrusive interruption of the historic park landscape, since rustic knolls do not have fronts or backs. The proposed ramps' uncompromisingly hard edges and right angles are antithetical to the English Romantic style landscape in this prominent section of the park. Is the Conservancy planning a concession in the provocatively unlabeled portion of the plan of the renovated Chess and Checkers house? The imposition of this aggressive new ramp suggests as much, since efficient through-the-site circulation and crowd control is a requirement of contemporary in-and-out burger-style fast food service. Finally, as detailed in today's testimony from the Society for the Architecture of the City, all 8 commissioners present at the December 7th, 2021 LPC public hearing on this application raised numerous objections to the proposed switchback ramp. The LPC commissioners' objections, however, have been downplayed and bowdlerized, as there is notable variance between what the commissioners said and the content of the LPC's advisory report submitted. Commissioners, thank you very much. Please deny this application.
All right, thank you. Todd Fine is next. Oh, sorry.
Yes, hello, I'm Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group. And I would like to repeat that the Landmarks Preservation Commission has made explicit recommendations about this proposal. And the Public Design Commission resolution would be binding about the design, preliminary design. Major changes would either need another hearing or subject to maybe some changes in the rules. So I don't understand why, if there is strong public sentiment for changes, if the Landmarks Commissioners encourage changes, why the Central Park Conservancy and Parks Commission would take this to the PDC today. That hasn't been explained, and it could be a problem and would further, delay or entangle this. So maybe the correct decision today would be to table this until the incorporations of the LPC commissioners can be made into the report and then presented to you again. It seems like the very obvious possibility today. And I'd like to also ask, there is this mystery, we shouldn't be approving things with these mystery purposes that aren't described, because the mystery purpose of this reconstruction is tied to a lot of these aesthetic issues and should weigh into your decision. If you knew that there was going to be, some sort of food concession or something, that would affect the way that you would think aesthetically about these issues about the rustic nature or the combination of the Moses design and the rustic nature, the ramp, all of these things are integrated. And so the Central Park Conservancy just said, well, we're going to do tours there. Well, they already meet for tours. So there's got to be something else going on here. They already have chess tournaments. There's got to be something else out there. You wouldn't do all this investment. And when we look at it that perspective, that there's obviously some commercial thing going on, it turbocharges this argument about the aesthetics of the ramp, because in that point, the ramp becomes this general attack on the aesthetics of Central Park that we're seeing in other places and that the preservationists have noted. And it's clearly excessive, and it could, as Mr. Greenwall mentioned, there's already an entrance from the other side, so there's really no reason to do it. I sort of take a little bit issue with the idea that that we can restore the rustic nature. I feel like you also do have a Moses design, so the idea of a hybrid presents aesthetic problems, and I'd like the commission maybe to think about that, how you can have a modern design and a rustic design together. Maybe we should just choose one or the other, or once a violation is made, try to preserve its purity rather than this. But I guess that's a larger question, and I await the Public Design Commissioner's thoughts about that. Thank you very much.
Signe, that's the end of the testimony.
Okay, thank you. I think the people who have testified do raise some questions that I'd like to ask you, Chris. One is the matter of whether alternate locations were looked at and why they were rejected in favor of the one that you're proposing.
Sure. We did. We actually looked at all the different locations. There was reference, and I showed a picture of it. There is access from the west side up to the Kinderberg. There are 2 points of access, one on the east directly in relation to the dairy itself, and then one on the west side. And it's, as I mentioned in the presentation, there's almost a 10-foot grade change. So although there's not a set of steps there, there is a significant grade change, which would require a significant intervention in its own right. Over here on the west side, and actually, if you could flip to picture or slide.
I've given you control, Chris, if you want to get to the correct slide.
Let me just 13. Bear with me as I flip back. If you go to the west side, not only is it the reason we chose a location is for its direct connection to the dairy itself. The goal behind this, and I'll just perhaps answer the question, there will be no concession. We run public programming out of there. The driver behind our proposal here is to actually create a public restroom in great need that I can't actually see where the numbers are. Sorry.
I can get to the other views.
If you could just go to 13. I'd appreciate it.
Slide 13.
Yeah. So the driver behind our location is direct access to the connection to the dairy itself. Actually, I'm sorry, slide 9. I was looking on the wrong slide. This is the west side access to the point. An ADA compliant regrading is actually, as a landscape architect, what that means to me is that it means that's the construction of a ramp. There's 9 foot of grade change between the edge of the path there and up to the Kinderberg itself. And as you can see in the photograph, the distance between the edge of the Kinderberg and the back of the ramps and the outcrop means that that inlay of ramp going to the south would actually be right on top of the rock outcrop. And be right up against the back of those benches and loom right up against the drive. There would be no opportunity to necessarily create any kind of planting margin in there, and it would kind of then just lay in there in the foreground and have an adverse impact on the views to the Kinderberg from this direction. And it would also create an inequitable point of access, certainly from an ADA and from an equity perspective in terms of compliance. The drivers behind our project is to create public access to the restrooms. And the connection between that and the dairy itself, which is why we chose that location on the east side.
So what you're saying is that there's 9 feet of grade change from the west and 10 feet of grade change from the east?
13 feet on the east side.
13 on the east.
Yeah, 13 on the east side. But given its proximity to the dairy, and the fact that we would ask people with mobility devices or baby carriages, that is the Kinderberg, to walk, I think about 600 feet around up along the drive to get to that kind of backside entrance. And that there's a direct sight line between the Kinderberg and the dairy itself. Those visual connections, I think, really strongly point to that is the right place to do the ramp from an access perspective and a matter of public equity, that you're not forcing people who need mobility devices to find their way or find additional signage in the park to go. Plus, there's not an accessible route between those two. You have to get up and over the Transverse Road, which would necessitate additional regrading of the pedestrian path system to get to this point.
I see. And your response to the LPC comments, how do you view those?
Yeah, well, with regards to the material choice, I think we did evaluate a number of different materials, and our position was that we felt that the contemporary intervention should be distinct, that it should be of a material that does not try to reflect or interpret the amount of handrails and guardrails there. We have what's required by code. There's no additional handrails or guardrails. The ramps and the retaining walls themselves we felt should be distinct, and it was something that the commission asked us to evaluate because there is some kind of rustic ashlar stone on the base of the Kinderberg itself and the staircase. And we felt the right preservation approach was to use a distinct vocabulary to mark its own actual intervention and layer itself, but use a material that actually had some reference to the historic materials, but not recreation of those materials. The other comment the commission made was in terms of pulling the ramp which would be to the north, away from the staircase itself, so it wasn't linked up to it. As I pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, there's a constraint because there's an existing tree. Not only is that would require to necessitate removing the tree, it would actually pull the edge of the ramp closer to the dairy and mitigate how much planting one could do in the foreground as you approach the ramp itself and actually kind of push it into the foreground. We did evaluate removal of the tree and what the implications of that were, what kind of spatially it meant to pull that ramp closer to the dairy itself, and how much space that actually gave you between the staircase and the edge of the ramp. And it doesn't actually yield enough space that any planting that one would do between the edges of the new ramp and the existing staircase would require a retaining wall and look like a planter and really just add to the actual level of kind of architectural intervention and not allow that staircase to actually remain independent of the ramp itself. So we felt it was better to keep the tree and link those two elements.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, would you care to ask any questions or comment? I can't see everybody's faces, but I'm assuming silence means, Carrie, is anybody raising their hand?
Ken Seth does.
Okay.
I would just like to say that given the access constraints that there are, this is not perfect, but I believe that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And my mother walks with a walker, and if she had to go an extra 650 feet around from an entrance where she could get out of a cab, that's a really, really long way for her. She's 80, she doesn't have that much more time. And 600 extra feet would be a long way. So in terms of there's accessibility that's a little closer to the street access that actually helps people who are in wheelchairs to meet the need to get to the site. And I would say that is a really big deal to me because then my mom loves chess and she can access it if she needed to. And I think she would be like many people who have ADA compliance issues. So I want to thank you for the thoughtful presentation that you put together. And I want to recognize that people said things that were truthful about that. It is a bit awkward, but we have to move into the modern era and do the best possible way that we can. And I think that this is as close to that as we're going to get. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken Seth. Has anyone else raised their hand, Carrie?
Oh.
So I'd just say that, Todd Fine raised a challenging question that we have wrestled with on multiple occasions, which is how do we marry interventions in the park that stem from different eras, Robert Moses in particular. And it is challenging, but I think that in most architectural renovations, there is, when it cannot be a perfect historic restoration, and where there is a new intervention brought about by whatever reason, in this case, law, and equity. The challenge is how to do this in a way that is respectful of the period of significance combined with the current exigencies. And so I support the way this has been designed. I have to respect, because I have been aware for many years of the depth to which the Central Park Conservancy examines their sites into which they have to make a change. And without, trying to do my own grading plan and second guessing CPC, I have to respect that they have looked at this as many ways as is possible. And that there is a kind of an overriding vision that the best place to put this is a way that least impacts either people's ability to access it, as Ken Seth just spoke about, or the interrelationship between two facilities, in this case, the dairy and the pavilion. So I agree that while I would love to see something that's kind of romantic and curvilinear and such, it really then would bring into question as to of what era is this ramp. And I feel that it is important that it be recognized as a 21st century, I will have to say, intervention. And so I personally, therefore, support the way this has been designed and where it has been cited. Are there any other comments? Carrie?
No.
Okay.
Not that I can see.
Okay, thank you. So we will then take a roll call vote. Let me just make sure I'm on the right page here. Yes, we will take a roll call vote on item number 28036. Commissioners, when I call your name, if you would please state your vote along with any final comments that you might have. Phil Ahrens.
Approve.
Ken Seth.
Approve.
Lori Hawkinson.
Approved.
Deborah Martin.
Approve.
Manuel Miranda.
Approve.
Karen Keel.
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approve.
Ethel Sheffer.
Approve.
Merrill Tisch.
Approve.
Mary Valverde.
Approved.
And myself, I also approve. So with that, it is unanimously approved as presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the last public hearing item for items number 28037 to 28041, the removal of artworks from the Manhattan Detention Complex located at 125 White Street in Manhattan. These items will be presented together in a single presentation. Then public testimony will be heard, followed by our commissioners' deliberation and vote. Carrie.
Thanks, Signe. So if anyone's watching the public hearing on YouTube, if you would like to give testimony on these projects that are being presented together, please do sign up on the form. There's a link to the form in the description below the video. and then join the Zoom meeting. There are instructions on how to join the Zoom meeting also below the video. And then when you are in Zoom, please be sure to rename yourself so that your name matches the name that you signed up with, so that we know how to we can find you and unmute you for your testimony. Thank you.
Okay, I've given control to Dora. Sasha, we're going to request to unmute you. And then you can begin when you're ready. I can advance to the next. There we go.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is Sasha Ginsburg. Oh, sorry. We'll get there. My name is Sasha Ginsburg, and I am the Executive Director of the Borough-Based Jail System at the Department of Correction. I am joined today by Dora Blunt, the Public Art Manager at the Department of Design and Construction, and Kendall Henry, Assistant Commissioner of Public Art at the Department of Cultural Affairs. We're here today to discuss the removal and storage of the existing artwork that is on the Manhattan facility site where the Borough-Based Jail System will be, and we'll get more into that on the next slide. The Borough-Based Jails program will consist of 4 facilities in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Each facility will have an equal number of beds. They will each have 886 beds for a total population of 3,300 people system-wide. As shown on this schedule here, we'll be procuring 2 different teams for each of the 4 sites. There will be one team who will dismantle the existing facilities and in the Bronx do our site preparation work. And there'll be a second team who will design and construct the new facilities for us. The dismantle design builder received a notice to proceed. Actually, all of them received notice to proceed in December, including the Manhattan site, which we'll be focusing on today. They are currently mobilizing to begin the dismantle work and are doing some on-site geotech testing, and construction will begin shortly. Just a little bit of a note about the Borough-Based Jail System. We are designing and planning for these facilities to be radically different than any facilities that currently exist today, really nationwide. We are really centering the humanity of people who are incarcerated and people who work in the facilities as we think through these facilities. And we're doing this all in order to close the facilities and the jails on Rikers Island. We are bound to close the jails on Rikers Island by 2027, and we are currently on track to do so through the Borough-Based Jail. We can go on to the next slide. So this is the site of the Manhattan Borough-Based Jail, which is currently the site of a DOC facility, the Manhattan Detention Complex. It is located at the intersection of Chinatown, Tribeca, and the Civic Center neighborhoods, as shown on the site plan. And it is important that the future facility reflect the intersection of these 3 neighborhoods. Currently, MDC, the facility that we are about to begin the dismantle of, is composed of 2 towers, MDC North and MDC South, and both are located just right up between Center and Baxter Street, just south of Canal Street. And go on to the next slide. These are some images of the current White Street that the current section of White Street that runs through MDC as it currently stands. When the North Tower was built in the 1990s, White Street was maintained as a pedestrian thoroughfare, as you can see here, and it is still used as one. However, the vehicles shown here are DOC staff vehicles who have used it for parking, given that none is provided within the facility or in the surrounding neighborhood. In the new facility, the White Street Arcade will be maintained as an enclosed pedestrian arcade, and we'll prevent any car access through physical security measures. In addition, we'll be providing 125 subterranean parking spaces for DOC staff to eliminate the need for them to park on White Street. And so while we see here that, this was intended to be a pedestrian arcade and ended up as being a combination uses parking and pedestrian access, in the future facility, cars will not be able to access the arcade in any way. And with that, I will hand it off to Dora.
Thank you, Sasha. Good morning, I'm Dora Blunt from the Department of Design and Construction. I'm the Public Art Manager. I'm going to be going through the next few slides. Just an overview of the history of the artworks on this site. Artworks at the MDC site were commissioned during two periods as part of the design and construction of the South Tower building completed in 1940, and then as part of the design and construction of the North Tower building completed in the 1990s. The New York City Percent for Art law was passed in 1982, and the artworks for the North Tower were commissioned in 1985, making these some of the earliest pieces commissioned through the New York City Percent for Art program. The artists who created artworks for the MDC site include Kit Yin Snyder, a Chinese-American sculptor, environmental artist, and filmmaker. Richard Haas, an American painter best known for his monumental scale trompe-l'oeil public murals depicting architectural scenes. And René Paul Chambellan, an American sculptor who specialized in architectural sculpture for Art Deco buildings. This is a plan showing the artwork locations at MDC. There are several artworks along the White Street Passage and a mural on Baxter Street. We will be looking at each artwork individually. This is an overview of the process for planning for the artworks at the MDC site in advance of dismantle work beginning on the site. We started by gathering research on the artworks, then we consulted with the artists, worked with professional art conservators to investigate and document the artworks, developed a proposal, and presented it to the community board. Our goal at this stage has been to save as much of the artwork on the site as possible based on objective information provided by the conservators. At the same time, we have worked to coordinate with the planning of the new BBJ facility for the site, which is currently in procurement. Today, we are seeking PDC preliminary approval of the conservation proposal we have developed. If approval to proceed is granted, we will begin the very careful step-by-step removal process for the artworks to be salvaged and temporarily stored. All work involving handling the artworks will be overseen by Stephanie Hoagland, a professional conservator from Jablonski Building Conservation. Once the design of the new facility begins, currently anticipated to start next year, we will be working with the design team to study options for relocating the salvaged artworks as part of the new site design. This process will involve consulting with the artists again and working to build consensus around a relocation plan. We will present the proposed plan to the community board before proceeding to PDC preliminary submission. Artworks approved for relocation will be restored before being reinstalled at the new location. Looking at each existing artwork location, we'll start with the René Chambellan panels on the north facade of the South Tower. Arms of the City of New York on the left depicts the seal of the City of New York. Enlightenment on the right depicts an allegorical female figure draped in a shawl, bearing a torch in her right hand and leading the figure of man who has his palms open and outstretched. Arms of the City of New York is above the main entrance to the South Tower facing White Street. Enlightenment is located above what was originally the visitors' entrance to the South Tower near the corner of White Street and Center Street, also facing White Street. Both pieces are rectangular cast bronze relief panels in the transom area above a set of entrance doors. The conservation teams have determined that both pieces are attached with fasteners and can be removed intact from the site. Currently, there is dark paint over the bronze surface of Arms of the City of New York, and Enlightenment has an uneven verdigris patina from oxidation. Both pieces are in relatively good condition overall, with cleaning and restoration recommended before any reinstallation. Based on the conservator's findings, our proposed plan for these pieces is to salvage them. For each piece that will be salvaged, the artwork will be thoroughly documented in situ before being carefully removed and placed in custom crates for storage, following the guidance of the conservator at each step. While the salvaged pieces are in storage, we will be working to develop plans for reinstalling them at the new BBJ Manhattan facility or at an alternative site. Next, I'll hand it over to Kendall Henry from the Department of Cultural Affairs.
Thanks, Dora. The next pieces that I'll be talking about was commissioned by the Percent for Art program. And this piece is Justice. Is an artwork by Kit Yin Snyder. Justice is comprised of 3 components centered around the White Street Passage. They're composed of the 7 columns of the Temple of Wisdom on the left, Solomon's Throne in the center on the roof of the pedestrian bridge, and upright, a pavement design along the central portion of White Street. The artist designed these pieces together to create a whole environment reflecting the theme of justice, and has described the location of the bridge between the two worlds, East and West, Chinese and American. Here's the location of Solomon's throne on the top of the bridge, shown in yellow on the map. Solomon's throne is a sculpture depicting the throne of the Old Testament judge, King Solomon. It is comprised of a central double-sided throne consisting of interconnected ionized aluminum wire mesh modules and flanked by 6 symbolic steps formed by stainless steel frame leading up to the throne itself. According to the artist, the intent of the sculpture is to form a pediment shaped along the top of the bridge, and it was meant to link between the two towers physically and symbolically. The conservative team have determined that the sculpture can be detached from the site without damaging it. The sculpture is comprised of, again, 3 component pieces, the throne and 2 sets of frame steps flanked on each side. The 3 components are fastened together and they're not welded. Based on the conservative findings, we propose to salvage Solomon's throne. For the purpose of removal, transport, and storage, it will be separated into 3 component pieces. These components will be easily assembled in the future. Next, we'll look at the 7 columns of the Temple of Wisdom. The sculptures are located near the corner of Center Street and White Street, as shown in blue on the map. The 7 columns of the Temple of Wisdom is comprised of 7 16.5 feet tall columns representing the 7 pillars of wisdom in the Temple of Solomon. According to the artist, her intent was to suggest a portico symbolizing civic justice near the entrance of the North Tower. 5 columns are mounted on the perimeter wall of the entrance terrace, and 2 columns are mounted on pedestals flanking the steps leading up to the White Street entrance and visitors entrance. The conservative team have determined that the 7 columns structure can be removed from the site without significant damage. Each structure will be has an interior armature that is surrounded by wire mesh bricks fastened by wires. The columns are in good condition overall and just need minor cleaning and repair. Based on the conservatives' findings, we are proposing to salvage the 7 columns. While the structures are in storage, we'll be looking at options for reinstalling them either in the new facility or at another site, an alternative site. Next, the 3rd component is of the Justice artwork is the pavement design upright, shown in salmon color on the map. Upright is a paving design on White Street between Center and Baxter, which is originally intended to be a pedestrian plaza or walkway. The artwork measures approximately 29 feet wide by 209 feet long. It's defined by a 12-foot wide pink granite band at the perimeter and with a 6-inch square black asphalt block pavers inside, along with 6-inch bands, red asphalt pavers, forming what the artist described as a geometric labyrinth that disguises pentagrams of 2 Chinese characters meaning upright and righteousness. As you can see in the current condition of the west side of the artwork. And here, also the current conditions, the entire north side of the design has often been obstructed by parked cars since it was installed. The overall design has been compromised over the years due to infrastructure work on the White Street and subsequent repairs that did not conform to the original design. The conservative team had determined that the artwork is in poor condition overall. The material used to create the design are standard construction materials. Based on the conservatives' findings, we are proposing to salvage only representative samples of each of the materials. The material samples can be used for future reference. Rather than saving the existing materials, which are damaged, we believe the better use of the resources would be to recreate the design with new materials at a new site, in consultation with the artist, of course. Now we'll be looking at the works of Richard Haas, both the Judgment of Solomon and Kang on the left, and the immigration on the Lower East Side of New York on the right. First, we look at the immigration of the Lower East Side of New York, shown in pink on the map. The artwork is a mural located on the second floor of the east facade of the North Tower facing Baxter Street. The murals consist of 7 panels. Each panel is about 17.5 feet high. Each of the central 5 panels is 12 feet wide and contains 6-foot panel glass block windows. And each of the 2 end panels are 8 feet wide. According to Richard, the murals trace the history of the successive wave of immigrants in the 19th and 20th centuries to the Lower East Side and Chinatown. He conceived it to be a timeline of the immigration of various groups, focusing on everyday struggles rather than heroism, and describing the importance of the site being adjacent to immigrant communities. The murals were completed in 1989, but in 1992, objections to the content of panel 6 were raised by the Hispanic Corrections Officers Association and some members of the Puerto Rican community, which felt that they weren't being represented accurately. The original panels were designed, the original panel design was shown on the left, and Richard Haas subsequently painted over the panels and developed a new design in consultation with the local community. The revised panel shown on the right was completed in 1997. The conservation team determined that the mural substrate is a stucco-like material over concrete, which unfortunately cannot be detached from the facade. The artist confirmed that the mural was painted directly onto the building wall based on the artist's original scale drawings. The artwork is in fair condition overall, while extensive fading and area flaking and missing paint is visible. Based on the conservative's findings, salvaging the existing installation is not feasible. So we are proposing to deaccession this piece, unfortunately. The mural will be thoroughly documented before being removed and recorded, and records will be archived for future reference if needed. And last, we look at the Judgment of Solomon and Kang, shown in purple on the map. The artwork consists of 4 square cast concrete relief medallions, approximately 6 by 6 feet square, with 1 pair on each on the east elevation side on White Street Bridge, and identical pair on the west elevation of the bridge. Here, there are 2 different designs of the medallions and with 2 copies of each. The medallions depict King Solomon, shown on the left, and Kang, shown on the right, as cultural symbols of impartiality and justice in Western and Eastern societies, respectively. Here you see the existing condition of the 2 medallions on the west facade of the White Street Bridge. And here you see the existing conditions of the 2 medallions on the east facade. The conservation team has determined that each medallion is a single standalone piece that is fastened to the facade with bolts and cement. The medallions are in fair condition overall, and cleaning and restoration of the polychromic finish is needed. Based on the conservative's findings, we are proposing to salvage the 4 medallions. While the medallions are in storage, again, we'll be looking at options to reinstalling them either at the new facility or at an alternative site. And this is an overview of the proposed removal plan. We are proposing the salvage of the 5 artworks that can be separated from the site and stored. We're proposing to salvage material samples of the pavement design for future reference so that we can recreate if approved. We're proposing the deaccessioning of the murals, immigrations of the Lower East Side, since it cannot be separated from the building wall itself. And again, the steps are being proposed to allow for dismantlement of the existing building in process. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Dora.
Thank you, Kendall. Sorry. This final slide is an overview of the schedule of activities related to the artworks at MDC. If today's proposal is approved, we anticipate removing the artworks to be salvaged from the site starting around the end of this month through April. The artworks are expected to be temporarily stored through 2027. When the new facility design starts, which is expected to be next year, we will study options for reincorporating the artworks at the new site or at an alternative location. New artworks will also be commissioned for the facility through the Percent for Art program. All existing artworks approved for reinstallation will be cleaned and restored before being reinstalled. Artwork installations would likely take place in 2027 when the new facility nears completion. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for that thorough presentation. Carrie, has anyone signed up to testify?
Yes, Signe. And before we go into the public testimony, I do want to say that our Conservation Advisory Group members did review the proposal, including all of the methods and materials for the removal and the documentation and storage, and found it to be appropriate. Members did lament the fact that the two pieces noted were unable to be salvaged and recommended full documentation of all of the artworks, which is being done, as they said, and possible recreation of the pieces either in their exact form or as exhibitions in the future. And Kityan Snyder is the first person who would like to speak.
Hold on one moment. We're trying to get you unmuted. Do you see a request that says that we've asked you to unmute? You might have to click. No.
Do you see a request on your screen? This is Kim saying, please unmute. It's like a little window.
We can hear you now.
No, you can hear me.
Yeah, this is
Kim.
Kim's. That's
Yeah, you're not who you, yeah.
Kityan's
I want you to hear
daughter
her.
speaking.
I want you to hear the artist, please.
We'll try and
They
send the
can't hear you.
request again. Hold on.
Pay attention to what's on the screen and you'll see a little notice. An alternative commission or whatever, I don't know who I'm talking to. An alternative would be for me to leave her picture on and for me to have her call, and I'll call her.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
It may, I don't know if you'll get horrible like reverberation. I have no idea. I'm going to try to call you so that you could
can try it.
Okay. No, it echoes
No.
too much.
We do have a statement, I think, that was submitted.
No, I would really like, the artist really needs to speak.
We can put her in the waiting room, which I think could remove the feedback on the phone line.
Okay,
But
that's a
then-
good idea. We could try
But
that.
I'd really
But
like
then
you to
she-
see her too.
Yeah, that's the other.
Actually, is there a little microphone on the lower left part of your screen? That no one can hear you. Look on the lower bottom of your screen, tap on this or click your mouse, click on the Zoom window, and you might see a little microphone in the lower left corner.
Okay.
Alternately, she, oh, perfect.
There she is.
Now I got it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, sorry to cause all the trouble. Well, my name is Kit Yin Snyder. I just want to mention one thing. When we're talking about the art removal, it's very little is said about the artist herself or himself. So I want to add that part of my history into what you people are doing with my sculpture. In 1949, I left China and came to America as a teenager. Eventually, I learned enough English, so I went to Music and Art High School, and then I got a degree in electrical engineering in City College. Anyway, now here I am as probably the first Asian Chinese artist getting such a big project awarded by the committee, the Percent for Art Committee. So I'm very appreciative. And I hope you will remember that in the future, the artist behind the artwork is just as important as the artwork, where the artist comes from and what it's got to do with the society where she's part of. So I'm very much a Chinese American at this point. Well, I appreciate that you will take good care of my sculpture. That I know, I'm sure you will take good care of it. And hopefully you'll find a home for it. That's all. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Thank you. Oh, okay. We do have another person, or two other people signed up. Alice Bank.
Hi, thank you. Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Alice Blank. I'm an architect who lives and works in Lower Manhattan, and I am vice chair of Manhattan Community Board 1. I'm speaking here today on behalf of CB1 to ask the commission to reject the application regarding the removal of the public art at the Manhattan Detention Complex at 125 White Street. I assume you have our resolution, of course, on this, and I'm sorry I came late if you had mentioned it. CB1 wants to be sure the commission knows that the community is urging Mayor Adams to put a pause on the proposed imminent demolition of the MDC and to put a pause on the proposed construction of a new 30-story jail almost twice the size at this site. The community strongly believes the new administration must take time to reassess what many believe is a rushed and deeply flawed plan to build 4 new borough-based jails costing taxpayers $8.3 billion, which includes the removal of the public art and the construction of a Sally Port at the Manhattan site. We very much hope you will support the community's desire to put a pause on this work until further review can take place of the various alternatives that have been asked for and not yet been reviewed, including the reuse of the existing Tombs complex. As you probably know, the Tombs, forming part of the criminal court complex at 100 Center Street, has been determined eligible for the state and national registers as an impressive example of modern civic architecture, possessing significance for its association with the history of criminal law, and has been deemed worthy for evaluation as a city landmark by the New York Landmarks Preservation Commission. It is the community's belief that the funding to remove the art, demolish the site of the existing towers, and the building of a new carceral skyscraper is extraordinarily wasteful and does not support a vision of a just, fair, and more sustainable future for the city. The project should be put on pause until we can be 100% certain that the demolition of the tombs and the removal of the art is 100% necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Todd Fine.
Yes. Yes, hello, I'm Todd Fine. I'm the president of the Washington Street Advocacy Group. And, you know, it's interesting that today we have this issue juxtaposed with the Faith Ringgold case, because there's some interesting commonalities, both in terms of the current disrespect, you know, conceded lack of maintenance, conceded lack of care in terms of presentation for artworks within the jail, and prison system. In this case, you had a plaza that was supposed to support this Solomon temple idea turned into a parking lot without any real, kind of in a disrespectful way, although we know the police park a lot of places. And then also we have artworks that are just in total disrepair, that are kind of further link it to the idea that this is a miserable place. This is a place of prison and pain. You have the artworks that are deteriorating to the point of where it's not even clear if they can even be preserved. And in that case, in the case of Faith Ringgold, you had the artist who was present, who was trying, was doing something that was questionable under fair practice or customary practice. And here we have at least one artist present who's somewhat ambivalent about what is happening here. And then the other artists whose work is actually going to be potentially removed forever or destroyed, not even present. And at the Community Board 1 hearings, you had real frustration among these artists, not just about, maybe they're hopeful that something good will come out of this, but real frustration about the way that the city has been treating these artworks for decades now. And this is an opportunity once again for the Public Design Commission to push back against these agencies who have decided apparently that they don't have to maintain this artwork, that they don't see it as part of their mission. And it leads the agency like the Public Design Commission, which is approved these things in the first place, to be put in an interesting position. So maybe there's some way that the resolution could deal with that. Maybe there's ways that the resolution could require some sort of commitments to maintaining the work, to working with the various artists, to make amends here. I think that something needs to be done, because the status quo is really not fair to the artists and the public, of course, who paid for these works under the assumption that they could enjoy them and then had them, deteriorate or, turned into a parking lot so they couldn't be observed. There's a lot more to say about it, about what the idea of demolishing artwork or what's going to happen. I don't really know, but I hope there's a good discussion about that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Snyder, did you want to say something?
Hi, I'm unmuted. Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Kim Snyder. I'm Kit Snyder's daughter, and I've been part of the meetings that have happened around this plan. And I will say there was limited discussion back in April, and in December it became clear the scope of kind of dismantling and reassembly. Like when is the timeline for that? I will say it's kind of happened rather like starting December, things really did start to move quickly. And I echo what was said from the Community Board 1. And we attended for the first time a Community Board 1 meeting in December, where I have to say I was like shocked. At the time, the slides were a little different, but there wasn't really artist reinstallation, wasn't part of that. And so I'm speaking as someone, my mother is in her mid-80s, and this has been an extremely saddening loss of legacy, right? To kind of deal with it at any point in your age, right? And, this idea of how ironic sculpture being kind of put in Rikers Island, right? That's where the storage is, in order to close Rikers. That irony, I think a lot of people will get. But my concern is, and I was gratified to see it in the slides now about the reinstallation or putting it somewhere else, because when thinking about the design of such a new structure, it does raise kind of logistical questions, right? And I would advocate strongly for that being included as part of any kind of plan to move forward. It was added in, but it was not in the slides that I saw on December 21st, which I was surprised by the timing and the rapidity of that kind of, whoa, why are we this late in the year? And I guess an outgoing administration. There were other reasons for that, but that was not part of it. And it was really just focused on new artist selection process. And that was really, really upsetting to me personally. And so I just want to put that out there that, you know, as my mother said, there are people behind this. So, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. One thing I do want to just clarify for everyone that the Public Design Commission does not review the demolition of buildings. And therefore we do not have jurisdiction over whether or not this building is demolished. Our jurisdiction is limited to the means and methods for removing, salvaging, and any potential future reinstallation of the murals. Sorry, not murals, artworks. Thank you.
Oh, this was a complicated one for sure. Are there any commissioners who'd like to speak?
I just like to say,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll
I'll go
just say
after
really
you.
quick, you know, it was really disheartening to see, you know, the parking spaces painted over the artwork of the the stone pavement artworks, and, you know, to then see, like, I'm actually pretty familiar with that area, but to see cars parked over it too, it's just really disheartening. And I just hope there are steps in place to prevent that from happening in the future.
I second that. I think that it's important that perhaps maybe there's a certain policy or clause that if something is, even if it's set into the architecture, that it is kept as an artwork, that it's not painted over, or just doesn't a cabinet doesn't go over a mural, or something is not obstructed or not considered, and that there are ways to penalize the agency, or in some way acknowledge that they're not keeping their end of the bargain in terms of the contract with the artists. I'm not sure where this policy would start, but I think that PDC definitely has an opportunity to consider and make this a serious issue in the future.
I just wanted to third that, that I've been in this neighborhood for a very long time, and it's a fantastic piece of work. Not that one piece of work is better than the other, but the Kityan work is just an amazing installation. And I mean, I would hope that it could somehow have a life. I mean, we can't, we have nothing to building, but if it could have a life beyond, or there are many other places in which it could be, I don't know, I'm thinking of that Sallyport thing that's going in downtown. I mean, there's so many places. I don't know what to say, but I just want to thank the artists and say what an inspiration that piece is.
Carrie, can you clarify whether we have direct precedent about reinstallation of artworks that have been removed for demolition purposes? Do we have any history on that?
I know I mean, I can do a little research, but off the top of my head, the one thing that project that comes to mind is the WPA era murals that were removed from the Kohler Goldwater Hospital. And so that building was demolished to make way for the Cornell Tech. And of course, we didn't have jurisdiction over the demolition of the building, but we did approve the removal, conservation, and reinstallation of those 3 murals in the new Cornell Tech campus.
You know, it's Meryl. Carrie, I just want to say, I chartered that Cornell Tech. And I have to say that this issue came up, and as part of the chartering, we asked for that. It was one of the conditions. And so I'm not sure what the protocols are here, but it's just such an honor to be here with this artist and to hear her daughter speak so eloquently on behalf of the city. I consider it a privilege.
Thank you. And I do believe that the relocation of the artworks was included in the RFP. So the teams that are working on the new facility for the site must study the relocation of the artworks within the new facility, correct?
That would be my understanding, because I think that's the procedure, but who knows when people set new precedent. I just hope they don't do it here.
Yes, I would like to ask a question, I guess, of either DDC or DOC. You said on several occasions, actually Kendall said on several occasions, that the works will be considered for this site or another site. And my question is another site a generic statement, or is it another borough-based jail site? Where I'm coming from with that is that the work of Ms. Snyder is very, very specific to a situation such as this, incarceration specifically. And I think the Richard Haas is also very site specific, but it would be, it is not specific to the actual function of this building. So I mean, because I'm a site designer, I think a lot about site specificity. And so I'm just wondering if, I mean, I know the murals may or may not be able to be, they cannot be preserved, they will be documented, whether there is a move to reinstall them in a new form, in a new place, I guess is to be determined. But I would like to hear from any one of the original speakers what you mean by, quote, another site.
Hi, this is Kendall speaking. Yeah, so our first goal is to try to incorporate the work into the new Borough-Based jail facilities. That's our first option, our first choice. But as that's happening on a parallel track, we'll be looking at other locations, particularly in the Chinatown community, maybe in other capital projects or in other locations where the works could be relocated or reconstituted within those spaces. So that's what we mean by another site. We don't have a particular exact location yet, but it's something that we'll be exploring in parallel to once the designers are trying to incorporate or studying the incorporation of the existing works into the new facility.
Can the living artists be part of this process?
It cannot work without the living artists being part of the process. Exactly. So yes, they will be part of the process. That's why we're doing it on a parallel track, because again, things are moving along pretty quickly. And so we want to start that process as soon as possible as well.
Commissioner Nielsen, I just want to add to what Kendall just said also that Carrie is correct. We did include it as a requirement in the RFP for the new facility that the design team has to study options for reincorporating these artworks. And also consulting with the artists is a requirement of that also in the RFP.
Great. I do think as Todd Fine stated in his opening remarks for this, that there is a kind of an interesting parallel between the first project we saw today and this last one, I believe, in that DOC seems to have a history of being quite disrespectful to the artworks that are under its, I guess you'd say, jurisdiction as custodians. And I would like somehow for if we give approval to this dismantling and relocation aspiration, that we put some strong language in there for the Department of Corrections to be respectful of the reinstalled and conserved art. It is, I mean, the Faith Ringgold piece, was really catastrophically handled by DOC. And I think as was said earlier, the complete disrespect for the paving is equally horrifying. So I do feel that we need to put language in there that is quite direct with regard to the future custodialship, or whatever the word is.
Ethel has her hand raised.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Following up on all of these comments and this extraordinary session and previously, I mean, I, among others, have been enormously educated and emotionally just very much involved and thinking of what can be our public role here. Here's quickly what I'm saying for the PDC or staff or commissioners to consider. I am appreciative now of what Signe, others have said, to be including the particular works of art we're talking about to be included in a demolition of the particular buildings or in RFPs. What I am suggesting as we move forward and from what we have learned, that perhaps we, the PDC, can establish language criteria of consideration by this body of works of art, public works of art, and that in any case study or demolition that the work of art that may exist have independent value and status in the future, and that whatever occurs in the future, that a work of art should be considered for preservation by this body as independently important. I'm not saying it well, but I hope you could get the point that while we can do it with individual projects, maybe we should set up a standard of criterion as the PDC handles or has to handle changes in public art due to changes in the building.
I'd like to second Ethel's proposal. We need very specific language. I think we have an obligation to preserve art, not destroy art. I think in this particular case, there are very few artworks that are on public display that actually have images of ethnic people of color in the history of New York in context. So in specific, the work that would be deaccessioned by Haas, while it's true that it's connected to the building, it will be destroyed, not deaccessioned. It's not being given to anyone. We would be approving destroying an artwork, and I'm not with that. I feel like that's wrong.
First time ever been mentioned.
I feel that the contextualized images of ethnic and people of color that is in that work, there's a public interest to maintaining that history and how these groups are seen. Even the history of the fact that there were people who disputed how they were seen is part of the history of New York that we would be erasing, and I'm not down with that. And I would say that there's a way to engage in the transformation of this work. It's already been transformed once. Haas already agreed. I read his letter. He already agreed that the work could be transformed. So he's done it once. And I would propose that we say part of this, in this particular exchange, that this work be transformed to a photographic digital work that could be then restored and then redisplayed as a single screen if space is an issue on a wall inside or outside the building. And that new transform work, it could be updated. If people in the future think that these images of ethnic people suck or they don't agree with them, he can update it again, or someone approved by him in the future can update it again. But that's part of the history of New York that we are removing if we remove the work. And then the other thing I would say, once it's a photographic digital work, it could be reinitiated as an NFT which would help offset the cost of future changes, care, and display. But that is going a bit far, but I think it's the very essence of the creative process that we grow, we change, and we update the way we see, in specifically the way that Haas did. The Puerto Rican guards felt like they weren't viewed properly as Puerto Ricans, and he changed. He changed the work, and they changed, and they were able to see themselves. That's a really important part. And I think that Haas has already agreed that the work could be transformed. I think we should engage him while we have the opportunity to agree to a transformation of the work from a wall-based stucco work to a photographic digital work.
Commissioners, I do want to just mention, sorry, Richard Haas
sorry.
is in the meeting. The name wasn't clear, so I didn't realize it before, but did you want to say something, Richard?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. I had not intended to speak. I was much more interested in seeing the drift of how it goes, and I want to really appreciate the fact that Killian spoke up, who is, someone I haven't seen for a long time, but is a wonderful artist and good friends in the past. Anyway, and I appreciate especially what Kenneth had just said. I think we are in a time when we can address work in a different way than we could 30 years ago. And this work is an ongoing and living work in that sense. And I'm an ongoing and living artist. I think my wife is going to agree with that at the moment. But we are both, of course, challenged by our age. And the work that will be done in the future on the site is challenging because it's going to take forever to do. And that doesn't add to the possibility of really dealing with it directly at this point. But I think that a discussion should continue both with DOC and the Design Commission and Percent for Art as to how one might address this more directly. And there are always possibilities. I understand the process, as you may know from my history, quite well, but I think the thing is open to discussion. Thank you.
Can I just one sentence? And that is, I think we have to act today on the proposals that are before us, and it's getting late, and we should do our duty. I would recommend strongly that we, the commission, the staff, and so on, make this overall point one for internal discussion and soon maybe, I would hope, some recommendations of criteria for the role of the PDC in its role of preserving public art. And then we discuss that because it's hard to get to every specific now, but I think we all agree of how important this all is. So I would recommend strongly that this become an item of important discussion appropriately soon, and that we vote as had been recommended and as we can on the items before us today.
Similarly, I'm wondering if DCLA or DOC could speak to the question of whether reinstallation of Richard Haas's piece, but in a different form, has been considered.
Yes, that's something we would consider. To be very, I'll give you a quick answer. Yes. We've heard such great ideas here. Yes.
Great. So I wonder then, just building on Ethel's earlier point and Ken Seth's observation about digital documentation, if we might attach to our vote here a requirement that DOC and DCLA examine in conversation with the artists the possibility of reinstalling the work in a different form that could build on the fragility of the original form.
I certainly would not vote to approve of the plan as it is currently stated unless there is a transformation of this Haas work. I can't vote to destroy a work. That's my position. So we can transform this work with the artist's agreement, and then I can vote yes. And that's how I feel about that.
I would concur. So I guess the question before us is, do we table the entire proposal before us? Or do we, I mean, what I'm trying to understand is, and I'm sure to Kim Snyder's statement, I would imagine that as this project, based on the timeline that I saw, that as this dismantling grows ever nigh, there is urgency to move on the pieces. So I guess the question that I would like the commissioners to consider is whether we table the entire proposition until such time as they change their notion of deaccessioning the Richard Haas work, or whether we approve the 5 pieces, I believe, that are going to be conserved and stored. That's just a open question that I would ask for some feedback on before we make a proposal to vote.
So are we not allowed to approve with the conditions of reinstallation?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So I think what you can do is approve the removals and storage with the conditions that the artworks all be conserved and reinstalled, or for the one, for upright recreated, and for the immigrants, Richard Haas's piece be recreated in a new form and reinstalled in the new facility.
So specifically in the Manhattan-based borough jail, or in any of those facilities?
You can say that they work, I'm not sure that you don't have to make that decision. You could say with the condition that the team work with the artist to and come back with a proposal for like where and how they would be installed. So, I mean, I do understand that timing is an issue both for the demolition of the building, but also for the artists who are, as I mentioned, not getting any younger and would like to be included, so that they can have those conversations now and come back with their proposed sort of revised proposal. But we would still be reviewing and we would still be approving the removal and storage of all of the artworks, if that makes sense.
Well, is that strong enough language? I mean, I'm concerned that if we approve this with conditions, I'm concerned that those conditions are just conditions. And I would rather approve something that we believe in. And so I guess that's my question for the other commissioners. Are you comfortable with the statement that Carrie just made? Or do you want to approve 5 and say the other 2 need to be recrafted as a strategy? The one being the paving and the other being the murals.
Can we separate it in that way, Signe, so that the 2 are not approved and the other 5 are? Is
that was a suggestion I made. I don't know whether that
I think that could be possible as to move forward, what has just been suggested.
And I mean, we definitely are voting on them as separate. I mean, I know they were presented together, but they'll be voted on separately. That they are separate projects and how they're sort of put into the record. I
also would like to add that it need to be part of the language that Haas
is part
of saying who, if in the future there are immigrants who feel they are not properly represented by his work, who would update this work?
Right.
Which I think is important for the civic aspect of how the work functions.
Yes, and similarly, Ms. Snyder should be consulted on the parameters of the recreation of her work, so that if that can't happen in the immediate future, that she has substantive input on what she would find to be acceptable reinstallation.
Or recreation, actually.
Or
for that.
recreation, correct,
Yeah,
yes.
for
And
that
then
piece.
as far as being heartbroken about the way that the works have been treated by the DOC, I don't know that we can address that now. It seems to me that that is a much broader issue that we need to have language about. If a work is given, there should be a standard of care.
Right.
But we can't do that in this.
I would agree with you on that, because we are simply approving the conservation, well, I should start in order, the removal, conservation, and storage of 5 pieces of art. And we don't know the future homes for those pieces, and therefore the agencies that will have them under their custodialship. Agreed with that. Okay. So would someone like to make a proposal for vote? Ethel seems to have her hand raised, but you're on mute, Ethel.
Doing it. I'd like to just phrase it, and I won't do it well, but I think Signe did, or Harry, that is that we approve the 5, and then there were the 2 others. I think that we were asked to do that separately anyway, and that we approve those conditions as we have discussed, in order to move the work and the art that is before us, and to do as good a job as we can right now. I wouldn't continue to load everything on this resolution, but I strongly advocate that this whole question requires future thoughtful discussion from the PDC. So I'd like to limit it, though, in the way I think Signe phrased it earlier, as appropriate, the 5 and the 2, and to get that language and get that going.
Right, because I agree that first of all, my cranky comments about DOC as a custodian, and the matter of whether the design commission needs to formulate a set of criteria should not be loaded onto this particular project.
Agreed.
So,
Yes, yes, but the future, yeah.
So Signe, I would propose, with regard to the 2 pieces by Ms. Snyder and by Mr. Haas, that we reject the application at this time and recommend that DCLA and DOC confer with the artists immediately on what would be acceptable to them in terms of the recreation of Ms. Snyder's piece and the reinstallation in another form of Mr. Haas's piece, and that those pieces will need to be represented to the commission.
okay, that's vote number 1. I agree with that. Let us vote on the on those 2 pieces. So, and then we're going to take another vote on approving the proposal for the 5 works that can be removed, salvaged, and conserved. All right, so.
Okay, so Signe, just to help out, the item numbers for just the removal of the artworks are 28039, removal of immigration on the Lower East Side of New York by Richard Haas at the Manhattan Detention Complex, and 28041, removal of upright by Kityan Snyder, also at the Manhattan Detention Complex.
Great. All right, so before us for the first vote is the rejection of item 28039 and 28041. I'll take a roll call vote. I believe Phil has left the meeting. So Ken Seth Armstead.
So I'm approving to reject, or
You're approving to reject.
I approve to reject, yes.
Okay. Lori Hawkinson,
I approve to reject.
Deborah Martin,
Approve to reject.
Manuel Miranda,
Approve to reject.
Karen Keel,
Approved to reject.
Susan Morgenthau,
Approve to reject.
Ethel Sheffer,
Approve to reject.
Merrill Tisch. Is she still here, Terry?
I think, I'm sorry, she had to leave.
Okay. And Mary Valverde,
To reject.
and myself, I approve to reject. So now moving on to 5 pieces. What item number is that, Grace?
So it's 28038, removal and temporary storage of the judgment of Kang and the judgment of Solomon. So 2 artworks in this one item number by Richard Haas. 280, I'm sorry, I skipped 28037, removal and temporary storage of Enlightenment and Arms of the City of New York by Renee Paul Chamberlain. And then 28040, removal and temporary storage of the Sullivan columns of the Temple of Wisdom and Solomon's Throne by Kilian Snyder.
Okay. So our second vote is for approval of the proposed removal, conservation, and storage of item 28038, 28037, and 28040. This is approval for approval. Ken Seth Armstead.
Approve.
Lori Hawkinson. Deborah Martin.
Approve.
Manuel Miranda.
Approve.
Karen Keel.
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approve.
Ethel Sheffer.
Approve.
And Mary Valverde.
Approve.
And myself approve. Okay. I believe with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all and hope to see you in person at the next meeting.